The stories that reporters do are like about 1 minute and 30 seconds. The news station wants you to continue watching, which lasts for an hour, sometimes more. No one's attention span is that long anymore. Why say it in this long segment when you can read it in like less than 5 minutes?
So definitely times have changed. It was a much different experience than the current generation, but I do still think that what I experienced when I was 20 years ago can still be experienced for that current generation, not through the TV screens, but through their phones.
It can be extremely valuable in connecting with people who know the story, who saw the shooting, who saw the fire. When used properly, it really does allow you to reach so many more people. When I watch like Mika do it, I'm like, dang, it's not something I'm used to.
In a world where information is literally at our fingertips, traditional news sources, once the pillars of truth and accountability, are struggling to connect with the very generation that holds its future in its hands. Young adults are turning away, seeking news in new, uncharted territories. But why? What's driving this disconnection, and what does it mean for the future of journalism? In this series, we're going to dive into the shifting media landscape, the rise of social media, and the voices of a generation that feels more disconnected from newsrooms than ever. Join me as I explore the challenges, innovations, and the possibilities for bridging the gap between young adults and the news that they need. Our first guest is a young adult with a unique perspective. With a foot in both worlds, Ariel reflects on how social media influenced her work.
I'm Ariel Argel, and I used to be a reporter about a few months ago, and I did it for about a year. I think most people tune into social media, but I think when it comes to very extreme breaking news, they do go to the news accounts on social media. They always read and repost, sometimes click on the link since it's actually more serious. I don't think anyone in the younger generation actually goes and watches TV. And there's also ads. No one likes to watch commercials or ads anymore, so of course they're not going to watch cable. They want to watch it where they can fast forward more easily or get things more faster. When I was in news, I would just watch what we showed, and like while I was working, I would watch what was on in the station. But now I watch it probably a lot less. I probably look more on social media from news organizations to get all of my news now. Getting stories from social media, I think that was the only way I mainly got my news. I would go to Facebook pages, look for Facebook groups, and look for people's problems in the community, see what people are complaining about, and that's how I would reach out to sources and see what they thought. Stories that I've done when I was a reporter, the ones that got more attention were the more fun-filled stories rather than like the serious hard news, unless the hard news was like super important or oh my gosh, this is going to affect everybody kind of news. I think more people are watching the fun stuff because I think with the amount of information everyone receives nowadays, I think there's too much stress. So people are not looking so much on the hard-hitting news just because of how stressful it gets now. And mental health is like a very big thing now. When my parents talk about mental health, it wasn't big in their days, but now mental health's super big. So now it's okay to be like, oh, I don't really want to watch that right now because it's a bit heavy for me.
Growing up with platforms built around short-form content meant her attention span, like many in her generation, naturally tuned out anything that felt overly long or detailed.
We grew up on YouTube and things where videos are a minute or less. And even though broadcast news is the stories that reporters do are like about 1 minute and 30 seconds, the news station wants you to continue watching, which lasts for an hour, sometimes more. But no one's attention span is that long anymore. And why say it in this long segment when you can read it in less than 5 minutes? Reporting and getting the news out there about community issues is always important, so it'll always still be there. I think just the platform of it itself will be changing. I'm hoping that news stations will start to get more social media based. All the people who work in the digital side, they're going to become the main source of news for everybody compared to those who are on TV, because they're the ones that people are actually going to be looking at their content for. Unless stations start just converting everything, not just social media, but maybe an app, that's where most people are going to get their things. They're going to choose one news station, download one app, or they're going to follow them all on social media.
Next, let's meet Eddie Down, a reporter with a passion that runs deep.
I've been reporting for about 10 years, professionally about 8. My mom was a nurse, so she wasn't home during the day, and so my dad would always sit me on his lap to watch the evening news. Watching the news was a routine, a bonding time for me and my dad. It was something I grew up with. And I was 8 when 9/11 happened. I was in New York City, and I could see from my apartment balcony, the smoke covering Manhattan. And I remember thinking, what's going on? Scared and confused. And so of course, the natural reaction I had was turn on the TV. And I was switching the channels, and every channel had the Trade Center pictures coming down. Finally, I got on the channel of my local news anchors who I know and grew up with. Hearing those familiar faces tell me about what was going on, for some reason that did something for me. It calmed me because it was coming from a familiar face. Later in life, I realized that I wanted to be able to give back to what they gave to me on that day. Say what you will, you can get your information from your phone, you can get all this, and it's true. I don't think you can really put a price on that personal connection. Getting that information from someone you know, someone you trust, from that relationship. From my early on experience with 9/11, I got to see how much of an impact being that friendly, familiar face can have for the community in a time of crisis. And so if I could do that for our community and give back, that was my hope.
He recognizes that the way younger viewers access the news today is very different from his upbringing. This shift in how we experience the news isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's just different.
Times have changed. Maybe not sitting down on your dad's lap to watch the news. It was a much different experience than the current generation. But I do still think that what I experienced when I was 20 years ago can still be experienced for that current generation, not through the TV screens, but through their phones. If it's a familiar face, if they see me on social media covering news, they have that connection with me. Oh, it's the news guy. I see you on Instagram. I would say almost or more than half of the people who stop me on the street are actually from seeing my stuff on Instagram and social media. And so I would argue that that connection is still being formed, just with a different platform.
Eddie grew up with MySpace and Facebook, studying social media reporting in college, giving him an edge in connecting with digital-first audiences where others may struggle.
I guess for me, what helped was not only was I part of the generation that had MySpace when I was in middle school, Facebook when I was in high school, but also I was part of that generation where in college they started having actual courses devoted to focusing on social media first. So I think that gave me a little leverage. It kind of was a niche that not all the older school reporters were using. I may not be the most polished reporter. People knew if you want to wait for the 5 o'clock news, then you can watch them. If you want to know what's happening right now, go to Eddie's. Eddie's doing a Facebook Live. I could find my own strengths in social media reporting, even if I wasn't as polished or good at live reporting than the more veteran reporters.
For Eddie, social media isn't just an added responsibility, it's an essential tool.
There's been times at some of my stations I've worked at where there's been criticism. Eddie, can you get your script done instead of posting? And I understand the concerns, but for me, my focus was getting that stuff out there on social media, getting my posted, because it's important to make your TV slot, make your deadlines on TV, but for how long is that going to be a reality? How long is this model of watching the 5 and 6 o'clock news going to last? In my opinion, it won't last. Despite there might be some criticism, it's digital first. If I get to a scene, the first thing I'm doing is taking picture, taking video. We're here at the scene, take a look, because they want it immediately. They want it now. They don't want to wait, because if you don't do it, another station will. I think we just have to adapt to the times. And if I still want a career, if I still want a job, the only way to ensure I have a career in this profession is that I continue to focus on social media digital, because I think that there will always be a place for that in some way moving forward.
Social media is a powerful tool to connect with viewers, but it comes with its challenges. Adapting to shorter formats, Eddie admits, can be frustrating.
I get discouraged sometimes when I do a long piece story, because I know if I post it, the engagement's not going to be great. And so what I've noticed is when I post a regular traditional story on, for example, Instagram, the traction of it, the engagement is lower than when I do a 1 minute and 30-second reel of what the story is. It's crazy to me sometimes, like I put so much work in the story, but they're scrolling, and it almost tests us as storytellers. How can you condense your story you worked all day on into a 1 minute reel? Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like there is that appetite to watch a story that's longer than 1.5 minutes. That's just what I've been seeing. It hurts me as a reporter. Ooh, I want them to watch the whole story. I've had to succumb to the pressure of shortening my clips. And sometimes maybe that means doing a series to get it out there. I think we're all kind of experimenting about what will work. I think there will come a time where we have to draw the whole format of what our report will look like. And I think it will be largely focused on the digital model. The way forward is creating more content that speaks to potential younger viewers, because although they may not watch the traditional TV news, I know if they're interested in a story, they're watching it on YouTube, on the app, on the Instagram page. You have to entice them. There just needs to be a change. And when you go into that editorial meeting thinking, okay, is there a story out there that will have some attraction to younger audiences who feel, why does this matter to me?
A seasoned news anchor with over 20 years of experience reflects on the evolving landscape of journalism in the age of social media.
I am probably, of the few people that you've talked to, I'm the oldest and least social media active. Jai Cunningham, and I am the 10 p.m. anchor for Island News, KITV. 27 years if you add it all up. I spent 26 years at KHON, and I've kind of done everything. I usually don't use my phone. So back at Christmas time, a young lady that was shot and killed by her husband, my wife asked me, is Pearl Ridge on lockdown? And I have no idea. My 22-year-old daughter knew what had happened and said, oh, some guy shot his wife. And she had found that out all through social media. So she knew more than I had no idea. I didn't know until I came in. I think it's an extremely useful tool. If used correctly, it can be extremely valuable in connecting with people who know the story, who saw the shooting, who saw the fire. When used properly, it really does allow you to reach so many more people. When I watch like Mika do it, I'm like, dang, it's not something I'm used to. The thing that worries me too a lot of people just take whatever they see on Instagram or whatever they see on Facebook as fact. And it's a little worrisome because we used to have to get 2 or 3 sources to confirm something that's happening. And now people just push whatever out into their social media world.
He believes that as news stations adapt, digital teams will expand, making news delivery more fluid and less reliant on traditional time slots.
Here locally, you have 3 television stations. Their digital teams will continue to get bigger. I think it's transitioning towards that, where there won't necessarily be a set time. Your grandma and grandpa used to know at 6 o'clock, they would sit down, turn the TV on, and here's the news. I don't see it being that. I think it'll be much more fluid and not as time driven, not as set like it is now.
Jai observes that young adults engage with news differently than older generations do, emphasizing the need for local stations to pivot towards on-demand news content.
You know, my daughter's 22, so she's half her life she's had one of these. Just the way they use them, I don't know that you can get them to turn the TV on. Yeah, I don't want to sound defeated, but they just don't watch television or watch it the same way we do because everything is so on demand. I think local television has to move towards that so that you can access it anytime and not just, tune in at 6. I think that's going away.
As we've heard today, the balance between speed and accuracy, tradition and innovation is constantly shifting. In our final episode, we'll explore how to diversify news content and hear from both young adults and newsroom professionals about their hopes for the future of the industry. I'm Kaylee Pasco Martinez, and this has been our exploration of the shifting news landscape. Stay informed, stay curious.